Well, considering who these belong to, I figured this camera angle is the most appropriate. This commission is for a member on the RPF. He goes by the name Goodie. Goodie has a YouTube channel which he reviews primarily thin neck lightsabers. Goodie is in my eyes, the go-to guy for a thin neck lightsaber review because he has every single one that's out on the market. I'm not joking about that either. He's got the elite ones, he's got the middle grade ones, and he's got the cheap Chinese knockoff ones. If you're looking for a review on a thin neck lightsaber, he's the guy to go to. Again, I'll have a link to his YouTube channel in the description below. Goodie reached out to me to have some commission work done, and I was completely honored and floored. Couldn't believe it. But then it became nerve-wracking because he didn't send me one V2 to do. He sent me two. So this is where my ability of consistency is really tested. Halliwax here, back in the basement. I have two V2s here today. They're going out to the same client, and I wanted to showcase them because they're about as vintage gets. First off, there's a lot to go over, so I've made a list, and it's a fairly intense list. We got a Anakin Starkiller FX run here. Every time I get my hands on one of these, I'm wicked excited because it brings me back to where it all started. So this sports the spinning emitter. This is very FX capable, but Chris, my client, he wanted his static version, and he wants the Soloshold version as his FX version. So he really blinged this out, if I could say that. He blinged it out. So of course he wanted all the physical damage, he wanted the acid age, he wanted the Trooper Trent color combination on the neck, he wanted all the paint weathered and aged, he wanted the rings with the dust in them. He went with the Trooper Trent's gaffer's tape adapter to allow it to spin. But what I usually do is I usually start at the top, work my way down. So the builder's kit and the FX kit comes with a nipple plug that I don't care for too much. So I use my own 8mm rod. I put the little chip in there in the centering divot, age it up, and install that. One other thing with the Starkiller is all of his screws are metric. So they're 3mm screws in the nipple and in the emitter plate, and a 4mm in the booster. So moving our way down, like I said, we have the Trooper Trent gaffer's tape adapter that we've weathered up with his instructions. We use his color combination on the wind vane, and then because this is the FX build, I don't remachine the rings. The builder's kit version, I remachine the rings, but the FX one I don't touch at all. The only thing I really do machine wise on the FX one is I polish up the booster, because for some reason the booster section had a lot of tooling marks in it on all of them, and you can get away with just doing this by hand with sandpaper, but I just polish it up before I acid age it. So moving down to the clamp, and Chris supplied me with a vintage clamp here. He extracted the locking block himself, and we have Sloth's vintage card that I age. I chemically age the card too, and I apply my own custom weathering product on the circuits, the traces. Please bear with me. This is going to be a real rough video because my mind's not totally with me. So we have a vintage clamp that Chris supplied. Chris harvested the locking block out of the clamp himself and supplied that with me. We have Soloshold lever, long lever here that we physically damage and acid age up. We got a little Nike swoosh going on in the milling circle. Chris sent me a vintage Mystery Chunk. He said, don't weather it up, Halliwax, so let Mother Nature take care of it. So Chris, every once in a while, give your Mystery Chunk a little rub down here, rub it around like this, give it a little twist. It likes it when you do this, tickles it, go like that. Oh yeah. Anyway, what makes this really unique is it's sporting a vintage cone knob. And the vintage cone knobs are actually harder to get than the vintage Mystery Chunks now. Really, really, really hard to get. If you look at the knurling is great on it. I mean, this thing is in really, really good shape. And I told Chris, I said, I'm not gonna sand the top of this. I can't sand the top of the vintage cone knob. He said, no, I'm totally cool with that. No, so really cool story how he acquired this too. So really cool story. But this is as vintage can get on a V2 until we find the lever. And it's only a matter of time of when this is discovered. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But another thing now is the fishing line. We've got the accurate fishing line in here now. And I don't think you'll be able to see it on screen. But with the right gauge in there, it fits right underneath the booster. And you can barely see it. So that's why you don't see it in the profile pictures. Like Brandon, but Brandon has mentioned it's still on there. The fish line's still on there today. But it's got all the physical damage, vintage cone knob, chunk, clamp, D-ring. I mean, this thing's a beauty. What Chris doesn't know yet is not only is it a beauty, but she's heavy too. She's very heavy, so I'm curious to see his expression when he picks it up, because this sports a silver shaft inside here. If you're not aware of the silver shaft, it's a plug that I put inside the ring section here with the hole down the center of it to simulate the weight of the V2 today. So congratulations there, Chris. That's that. Here is the FX emitter plate that I weather up and do all the underside with my stencils. But a lot of people ask on my order form, Halliwax, why don't you dent the emitter plate? And I'm afraid when I'm denting these things, I'm putting a lot of heat to it, and I can get this stuff to move. And on two of mine that I've done, I've actually oblonged the circle in here, and I don't like that. I don't trust that. You could, if I handed it to you, you couldn't tell, but with my eyes, I could see it, and it bothers me. So I don't ever want to do that. I've seen other people dent their emitter plates and get away with it, but I just don't want to do it. So I always leave the emitter plates the way they are. Especially with the Starkiller. The Starkiller plate is much thinner than any others, and even the way that it sits inside the emitter itself is very thin. I don't want to warp anything in there. Another thing though, too, Chris, is on all my, I hope I got this all in frame, and all my emitter plates, I always make a notch here, okay? And there's a corresponding notch inside the emitter. So those two notches align up. That way the orientation of the paint chips are the same. It's very, very important with the Soloshold one to line the notches up, because the way that they're tapped, they only go in one way. So if you start shoving it in there, you can ruin the thread on it, and thread pitch on it. So the notch just doesn't help orientate the paint chips, but it also orientates the threads on the Soloshold. So it's very, very important. I mean, you can see the notch. The notch is, I mean, you can see the notch. You just line the notch up with the other notch. But this is the Starkiller FX for Chris. I call this option here is basically the I call it the Michael client I had a while ago. I actually have his stuff back in here for upgrades. We talked a lot and went through all the options, and I said I gotta figure out a better way to label all these. And I said, you know what, it's Michael's V2, so I just call this the Michael edition. But that wraps up the Starkiller. This is a legendary hilt. She's old, but it's legendary. This is what started it all. Well, technically, Starkiller's 2015 run is what started it for me. But in the FX world, this is where it all started. Starkiller paved the way for us. It's a pretty cool design that still holds up today and totally FXable. He's actually coming out with FX pommels. I haven't been on the RPF in a month, though. I don't know how that's going, that run's going. But last I knew, there was a run of FX pommels. So if you have a Starkiller FX, there's a chassis already out for it, a beautiful chassis. All you need is the FX pommel. So you can grab one on the RPF. I have a link in the description below for you to go follow. So let's go put this one away and bring out the Soloshold. Just checking on my notes. All right. So we got the Big Daddy with us right now. I'm just checking my notes here because I got a lot of notes. So what we have here is a Soloshold Gen 2, also known as the Real Hero. The Real Hero because the V2 was seen the most out of all the other lightsabers used in Return of the Jedi. So, where do we start? So Soloshold supplies you with a wicked little hilt right off the bat. But just like my Starkiller Builders kits, I tweak little things here and there. So I remachine the ring section just like I do with the Builders kit. So the ring section is totally remachined. I touch up the wind vane a little bit and the pommel just a tad and dial it back into spec. But after I'm done remachining, I apply all the physical damage. This emitter spins as well, like the Starkiller, but the client opted for locking it into place. So I have the emitter locked in place with the gaffer tape, so I can't spin it for you. But this emitter does spin if you remove the tape. The screws Aaron supplies with the kit are a little long, and that locks the emitter into place for the FX community. So I upgrade all the springs, or do it springs. So I upgrade all the screws. Upgrade, or should I say downgrade, because the screws are smaller. I don't know. So I downgrade all the screws to a shorter length. They're all 440. That helps allow the emitter to spin. But Aaron, he is such a perfectionist. His tolerances are so freaking tight on these things. I mean, they fit together like NASA tolerance requirements here, which is great. It's solid, it's rugged. But once I start denting the emitter plate, I have a hell of a time removing it. So I machine just a little bit off the inside of the emitter plate here. This section here, I take a few thousandths off. Polish it all up. And then inside where the cup sits for the electronics, that too is very tolerance tight. And I grease all my threads before it leaves the basement. Just with the tolerance of the grease, it locks up. So I machine the inside of the emitter, polish that up, and she spins real freely. But unfortunately, I should have done this video before I put the tape on. So from starting from the top to the bottom like we did with the Starkiller, I change the screws over. I keep on saying springs, not in the garage. I change the screws over. We modify the nipple. I modify the nipple plug that Aaron supplies with his kit. Give it a little chunk, the centering divot, chemical age. We use the Trooper Trent color combination, of course, on the wind vane with the newly machined wind vane. Remachine the rings. Add all my paint chips to the ring section, top and bottom. There's nothing random with these ring chips. And next we have the vintage clamp. Another vintage clamp Chris supplied me. He extracted the locking block himself. Slots card, chemically aged again. Soloshold long lever, physically damaged, aged, and weathered. We have Soloshold's cone knob. His Gen 1 mystery chunk. I've been away, but I've been getting visitors saying that he's got a new mystery chunk out there, so I believe it screws in just like this one, so all you have to do is unscrew it and screw the new one in. And here's the other vintage D-ring. I remachined the pommel recess here. We've got some fishing line on there. And Chris, when you remove this fishing line, when you remove this pommel, you're most likely going to lose the fishing line. So I supplied a bunch of extra fishing line in the box. So look for the green tape, and there's more. It's accurate to what Brandon said, so there's more fishing line in the box. So on the FX pommel, this design is real beautiful to me. It's pretty. I don't want to damage this all up, put all the dings and dents in there. I think it takes away from that. So when I say on my order form, all I do is I put the little chip in here, because when it's sitting on the table you would see the chip, and the chip's in the pommel underneath the pommel cube. Chris forgot to send me a D-ring for the FX pommel, but luckily enough I'm a V2 guy and I got a ton of Wanawanga stuff here. So I threw on this Wanawanga D-ring I had with my centering plug. That's the other thing too with this with the Soloshold pommel cubes. They're much smaller than the Starkiller ones, so the D-ring will slide side to side and you can see it come out the other side. It drives me nuts. I've said it in other videos, when the D-ring on any hilt, when the D-ring comes out and you can see the cut edge, it drives me nuts. So I just 3D print this little plug that sits in the middle and keeps it centered, so it won't go anywhere. But again, with the Soloshold, it's a little bit smaller cube, so even the Wanawanga one would fall out and you would see it. So I just put that little plug in there, and it doesn't come out. And we got another Soloshold Gen 1 mystery chunk. So that pretty much wraps it up. Got the FX plate. I don't dent the FX plates. The stencil underneath, all polished up, so it makes a smooth transaction. And again, like I said, that notch, you have to make sure you line that notch up, otherwise you're going to strip the threads in there. I just want to thank Chris for his business, his friendship, and I really appreciate you actually let me use the Yuma as my prototype for my stencils. I still have that over in the box. That's going to be shipped back with you too. So I really appreciate you letting me use the Yuma. I hope you're happy with them. Seriously, I say this on every one I say this, but I don't want these to leave. I don't want to send them out. I put so much work into them. I don't even have my own V2, and it's like, okay, well, I'd really like to keep these. So one day I'm just gonna ask the client, hey, do you mind if I buy it off you, because I'm never gonna finish mine. But I really, really like these two, and these are the most vintaged out that we can get. I mean, I've never worked on any other V2 that the client is supplying with all these vintage parts. You know, the cone knob alone is so hard to get now. This was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun working on these. And what's most fun about this for me is I work my regular day job. I come home at night. I start tinkering on my V2s, and then I get to almost every night I'm done working on a V2. I update the client and get to hear his reaction. So that's why I always keep my runs small. That way I can keep in communication with everybody, and they can be part of the process. Some clients even video chat with me while I'm working on their stuff, and they're part of the process. Hell, if they wanted to take a flight up here, they could come work with me in the shed. I don't care. I really enjoy that part of the commission. That's my favorite part. And then hearing or seeing their expression when they open up the box, when they get it in hand, that's awesome. Totally awesome. But again, thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. I am really happy with the way these came out. So I hope you're as happy as I am. Thank you again for everything. It means a lot to me. This is Halliwax, out.